Hi folks, the Filipino P here, and I'm finally getting ready to leave Florida and head to my next destination. Florida was great, and I ended up staying here a lot longer than I thought I would, but there was just so much to see. I was originally only gonna stay in the Sunshine State for a week or two, but then someone would say, hey, you gotta try Walmart or Cracker Barrel, or you gotta test drive a Tesla. So I kept delaying it. But now, I'll be traveling to the great state of Georgia. At least I hope it is a great state. I don't really know much about it, and I'm not sure exactly where I'm gonna go once I get to the Peach State. I'm particularly interested in the people there and seeing if they're any different from Floridians because even though it's close to Florida on the map, I've been told that the US is like 50 different countries, all with their own attitudes and accents and ways of doing things. So I'm really looking forward to checking out the culture of the Deep South. But today, I'm going to be talking about some of the things I've already noticed about the US. Now, it might be different in other parts of the country, but I have a feeling that the things I'm about to mention are pretty much nationwide. So if you're a tourist in the US, or maybe considering moving here, here's a list of things about America that might take you by surprise. A list of things you do not want to do. Okay, let's get right to it. The first thing not to do in the US is be a space invader. America's a big country with lots of public areas, but when it comes to personal space, do not invade it. In countries with a high population density like mine, there's a lot of bumping and physical contact. People even sit right up against other people or even on top of each other on public transportation, like jeepneys. This is not something you ever want to do to an American. So keep your body at least a few feet away from the person next to you. It's not a rule or something you'll see posted anywhere or even talked about. It's just something you're supposed to know, and if you violate it, you'll often get a swift reaction. When it's absolutely necessary, like when you have to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of a movie, it's acceptable to brush up against other people's legs, but you should say, excuse me, sorry, excuse me to each and every person you're making contact with. I talked to a few Americans that said there were tourists from other countries. Brazil was mentioned, where people thought nothing of just bumping into you from behind, or even worse, bumping into you as they race around you to cut in line, which brings me to point number 2. Don't cut in line. This may or may not surprise you, but there are many countries where cutting in line is either acceptable or at least tolerated, like in China, the Philippines, and apparently Brazil. If you've done much traveling to other countries, you've probably seen it, but please, if you value your life, don't try it in the US. Americans are all about fairness. They don't easily tolerate corruption, different treatment for different people, and they particularly don't like rule breakers, especially when the rule you're breaking is right in front of them. It's a good way to get a foot up your butt, or at least a loud protest and a sea of angry stares. I don't exactly know why some cultures allow it. It's obviously unfair, but if you dare to do it in America, here's the truth. There will be consequences. Which brings us to the next one. Don't be loud. In the US, silence is golden, and the way they see it, they have a right to peace and quiet. No lawnmowers before 8 a.m. No loud parties after 10 p.m. People don't like to live near airports. They don't want to hear your dog bark, and except on special occasions, they don't want to be forced to appreciate their neighbor's taste in music. While shopping, stores play soft music, not earth-shaking disco music like they do in the Philippines, because people like to be able to hear each other talk without having to shout. So when you're in public, especially in a confined space like a bus or an elevator, keep your voice down to avoid sounding like an obnoxious tourist. And here's another don't. Don't stare. Even if the person sitting across from you has pink hair, red contacts, and vampire fangs, don't stare. I've already met some very strange characters here, and believe me, I've been tempted. But it's only socially acceptable to make brief eye contact before looking away. In fact, in some parts of the country, usually in big cities, I've been told it's better not to make any eye contact at all, which is completely different from what I'm used to. Because even though we know it's not polite to stare, Filipinos still do it, especially if you're a foreigner. You guys that have been to the Philippines know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Because you're like the novelty. Speaking of things we do back home, you might have seen a Filipino saving empty bottles and jars and seemingly useless things that you'd probably toss away. Because people don't waste what's useful to them. But Filipinos do waste what's precious to an American. We waste time. Never waste an American's time, which brings us to the next item. Don't be late. In the US, they have a saying, time is money, and they mean it. So when you say you're gonna meet someone at 3 p.m., they don't mean 3:30 or 4 o'clock. They mean exactly 3 p.m. And if you're not there, they often just leave. And you probably won't get their cooperation in the future either, because once you get the reputation of someone that's unreliable, forget about it. Now, I don't know if you're all this anal about time, but I kind of like it. It's precise and predictable. And you get more done in a day when you live in a society where everyone agrees to be on time. But as picky as Americans can be about some things, like protecting their personal space, not disturbing their peace, and not wasting their time, they're also incredibly friendly, at least in the South. So the next don't is actually a nice don't. Don't be surprised when people just walk up to you and start talking about anything under the sun. Men, women, and even children. Complete strangers will compliment your dress or a piece of jewelry you're wearing. Or they'll see you holding a jar of peanut butter and walk over to tell you you should buy a different brand because it's cheaper. The cashiers will even strike up conversations. And if you end up sitting next to someone in a waiting room, there's a good chance you'll know their whole life story before your name gets called. I really like that. It makes me feel like accepted as a member of the community. And there's kind of a camaraderie among the people here that makes it okay to actually talk to people and answer their questions. On the other hand, there's one question they don't expect an answer to. If an American says, "Hi, how are you?" they're just being polite and don't want a detailed response. You're just supposed to say, "Great, and you?" And then the conversation's over, unless one of you wants to keep talking. Now, if you ask a Filipino, "Hey, how's it going, dude?" we'll take you seriously and try to give you an account of our day. We don't know why you ask, and you don't really care to hear it anyway, so if you don't want the precious time wasted, it's best not to ask. And while we're talking about things not to say, here's the next don't. Don't talk about politics. Americans are deeply divided right now. And it's not just a difference of opinion. It's more of a life or death topic over here. They're very passionate about it. And it's very easy for them to lose control of their emotions if they even suspect that you don't agree with them. Some of them won't even associate with, date, or even talk to people from the opposing side, which is truly unfortunate. It'd be much better for national unity if they thought of themselves as Americans first, instead of members of competing political factions. But that's just the way it is right now. Hopefully, they'll come together again in the near future. But for now, it's best to avoid the topic entirely. And just for good measure, you probably better add religion to the list too. Another thing I wasn't expecting is that it's apparently bad manners to ask someone what ethnicity they are. To some people, that's considered rude. Whereas to a Filipino, If we're not sure, we just come right out and ask. No big deal. So now here's a few don'ts about traveling around. Outside the big cities, don't rely on public transportation because in many places, it's just not available. And if you're planning to get taxis, then I hope you brought a whole lot of cash because it's bloody expensive here. Americans like their mobility and their freedom, and when you put those two together, it spells one thing: a car. Because everything's so far apart in the US, it's almost a requirement to own your own car. Almost every American I've met so far has their own vehicle. Sometimes two. Even their kids own their own cars. And once you reach 16, they either have a car or they sure want one real bad. So if you're planning to stay in the US for any length of time, you're probably gonna need to rent one. And let me tell ya, it ain't cheap. Renting a simple compact car costs about $1,200 a month. It's almost cheaper to buy a used clunker and just give it away when you leave. And when you're driving around, here's an important don't. Don't ignore the road rules. Now, every country has traffic laws, but the amount of enforcement varies by country. The Philippines has rules too, but very few people get stopped for anything, unless they wreck their car. Speed limits and lane markers are just suggestions, and hardly anyone follows them. But in the US, if it says don't make a U-turn, then don't make a U-turn. They take their rules seriously. And don't honk unless you need to. They don't lay on the horn like we do, and if you're going down the road honking every time you pass someone, you're gonna attract the wrong kind of attention and be seen as yet another crazy Asian driver. And in case you drive to a restaurant, here's a couple more don'ts that'll come in handy. First, don't freak out if they bring a bunch of stuff to the table that you didn't order, like breadsticks, chips, French fries, salsa, or warm bread. It's all free. A lot of places give you free appetizers, and if you run out, you can ask for more. And no, it won't show up on your bill. And if it's a fast food restaurant, don't leave your trash on the table. In the US, you're expected to clean it up yourself and pretty much leave the table the way you found it. Same thing with gas stations. When you fill up your tank, you have to do it on your own. Now, it might seem strange that in a land of such modern amenities and great service that you have to clean your own tables and pump your own gas, but I think I might have a clue as to why. The labor over here is really expensive. So although a lot of their stuff is top-notch, they try to eliminate the cost of labor on the little things that people are perfectly happy to do themselves. In the Philippines, labor's dirt cheap. So hiring a busboy or a gas station attendant only costs about $10 a day. But in the US, it'll cost many times that. And here's one last don't when it comes to people that perform a service. In the States, don't forget to tip. Unlike in the Philippines where it's optional and often not done at all, make sure you leave a decent tip for waiters and pizza delivery guys and the people that bring your bags to your room. It's the American way. Well, that's my list of common don'ts that visitors need to know in order not to offend the locals. I'm sure I'll be noticing plenty of other things as I go along, and I'll be giving you a report from Georgia in just a little while. Till then, folks. And here's a bonus don't that nobody's gonna tell you until you break the rule. I found out the hard way. And it's kind of ironic that I was actually trying to do the opposite by paying respect to my host country. 2 videos ago, I wore a red, white, and blue swimsuit that I special ordered in honor of the United States. But I got several comments saying that it was against your custom and was actually disrespectful. Of course, I don't mean to offend, and so I apologize. This is one of those cases, though, where I hope that the intent is more important than the action. And when I saw so many people with flags on their shirts, on their caps, on their bandanas, on their cars, I thought it'd be a harmless way to show my appreciation for the way I've been treated here, but apparently not. Maybe because I had a flag on my butt? I have no idea, but maybe one of you out there can explain it to me, please. Till next time. Give me a P, give me an E, give me an A. What do you got? What you got is the best source of information about life in the Philippines. I can give you the inside scoop about everything you need to know, then cheer you on as you start your overseas adventure. All I ask in return is that you subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and consider becoming a patron to receive extra content and exclusive videos. And while you're waiting for the game to resume, why not check out the halftime show? I wish I had bigger pom-poms.